The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Ukraine has agreed on a framework economic deal that could give the US access to its critical mineral resources. He described the deal as part of a wider agreement, but insists Ukraine needs security guarantees from the United States. The US President Donald Trump says the two leaders will meet to sign the agreement in Washington on Friday, but he stopped short of offering full security guarantees to Ukraine.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy first put forward the idea of giving the US access to its mineral wealth last September, even before Trump was elected. The aim was to offer Trump a deal he couldn't resist, as a way of gaining his support and also of strengthening Ukraine's position in any future talks with Russia. Kyiv claims the country has some $12 trillion worth of minerals, including more than 20 types listed by the EU as critical, such as lithium, a key component in batteries, and titanium used in everything from aircraft to missiles. Ukraine also has deposits of rare earths essential for devices such as smartphones and computer screens. The new deal is also reported to give the US access to Ukrainian oil and gas. The Ukrainian president had balked at a previous US offer, which included a demand for $500 billion worth of profits from its natural resources as payment for past aid provided during the war, something critics in Kyiv described as colonial. The previous offer also failed to include any security guarantees.
Speaking at his first cabinet meeting, US President Donald Trump said the US won't be offering very much in the way of security guarantees for Ukraine.
We're not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor. But we're going to make sure everything goes well. And as you know, we'll be making we'll be really partnering with Ukraine in terms of rare earth. We very much need rare earth. They have great rare earth.
For more, I'm joined now by Ukraine's former Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture, Tymofiy Mylovanov. He is now the president of the Kyiv School of Economics. Welcome to DW, sir. Thank you so much for your time. We just heard Donald Trump there confirming that Kyiv won't get much in the way of security guarantees for Ukraine. Will President Zelenskyy still sign an agreement without these firm guarantees in it? He says that he wanted those firm guarantees.
Well, there's actually a clause in the draft, and the draft agreement of the minerals deal has just been passed by the cabinet of Ukraine about 5 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago. So there is clause number 9 in it, which speaks about security guarantees that both countries will move forward and seek. There's no specifics there, and the entire deal is to be developed in what is called the fund agreement. So I think the bargaining behind the doors will continue, but what we have seen in the last week or two, that the public posturing and political theater on both sides, and specifically by the Trump administration, has been decoupled by what is actually in the deal.
OK. You mentioned there that there are no specifics. I mean, it seems like a lot of the details here are going to be worked out after the fact. So doesn't that sort of seem like a large invitation for a lot of misunderstanding?
Well, I think it's pretty clear what people disagree about, what the negotiating teams disagree about. The ownership structure has been moved towards Ukrainian favor relative to the original deal in which 100% was owned by the United States. President Trump continues to point out that this deal will pay back for the $500, $350 or $100 billion that was provided to Ukraine in support. President Zelenskyy multiple times said that it's a red line for him. So they continue to give different public statements to different relative audience, their domestic audiences, while in the deal there is nothing about this 500 billion paying back and so on forth. So disagreements are clear. The ability to compromise is also clear, but it's not going to be an easy walk.
Donald Trump says it is up to the Europeans to offer security guarantees. Do you see the Europeans prepared to do that?
Yes, absolutely. I think Europeans in general are pretty scared by the situation with the United States, by the reality in which Trump might withdraw completely the security umbrella from Europe. And they understand, and this is almost a direct quote with my personal conversations with some European officials, that, if Ukraine implodes, then Russia will have not just 200 brigades, but 300 brigades together with the Ukrainian army. Now, that's probably not going to be true, but that's the perception by some officials, and they are really scaling up both domestic military defense support and support to Ukraine.
So do you see this deal then as a win for Ukraine?
Yes, given the reality, given the world we're in, it's a win. I would have liked to live in a different world in which the U.S. doesn't try to disengage from being a military supporter of Europe and Ukraine, but we are not in that world. So to keep a relationship with the U.S., to have some language and some support, that is already a win. Now, in economic terms, this deal can generate an investment gold rush in Ukraine, which would benefit the country economy. But on top of that, there are also provisions about audit and corporate governance, so it will help with the corruption issue. There are multiple benefits which are economic. President Trump at this cabinet meeting, which you just cited, mentioned something different too, that we're going to maybe back up Europeans in their provision of European security to Ukraine. And I think that was Macron's visit, and later the UK Prime Minister visit to the United States, trying to figure out if the US is willing to give security umbrella, at least to the European troops and European security that will be provided to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned it earlier. Trump has presented this agreement as a form of repayment for past military aid from the US, which doesn't seem to be in very good faith. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, so President Zelenskyy said explicitly that, the deal was made on the previous support with Biden and with the Congress of the United States and with the country, the United States of America, not with Trump, not with the Trump administration, and not with the new officials. And so that's a really point of disagreement. I concur with your remark about the good faith, but also about the difference between what is being publicly portrayed and what is happening in reality. In reality, there is nothing about repayment. There is nothing about 500 billion. There is no specific number whatsoever in the current draft that has been passed by the Ukrainian cabinet. Now, does it mean it will not return to the table during the next stage of negotiations? Well, I'm pretty sure that the U.S. side will try to do it again. And I'm pretty sure that the Ukrainians will push back again.
A question about Ukraine's mineral wealth. A lot of it is unexplored. Does it definitely have all of these minerals and rare metals, or could it be that President Zelenskyy is exaggerating what he has to offer just a little?
The estimates are based actually on the Soviet Union numbers and then some updates, but the Soviet Union numbers have been pretty robust. And the feature of these rare earths and critical minerals, that they're in the ground and they don't tend to go away. They don't go bad unless they have been, they have to be developed. So the point of this agreement is that the value of this agreement is pretty small, pretty low, unless there are substantive investments to develop those areas in which these critical materials are. And there is some existing sources which are being developed, and even some American companies present there, but the investments will be required in order for that deal to make any sense on the large scale.
A good chunk of these minerals are in areas currently under Russian occupation. How will Russia react to this?
Well, good chunk, but not a majority. I actually have access to the numbers, but they are sensitive. The majority, much more than 50%, much more than, it's high, it's close. Well, no, let me pause here. But a large amount is under Ukrainian control. Now, there are some provisions in the draft, in the deal about the sanctions, which is not explicitly saying that you're not allowed to for the U.S. to go and develop anything on the occupied territories, but kind of makes it very difficult. So it's another point of contention. We also have seen just recent reports today that Russia has offered a deal on critical materials, including on the occupied territories. Now, I think the U.S. might be tempted to take that deal, but if they do, I'm not sure American companies will go in, because the next administration, unless it's a continuation of this current administration, will likely look at this deal with Russians as a travesty, and there will be sanctions and there will be consequences.
Tymofiy Mylovanov, former Ukrainian minister and current president of the Kyiv School of Economics. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your insights. Let's get more from our correspondent in Kyiv, Nick Connolly. Nick, what do we know about what exactly has been agreed to here by Zelenskyy?
I think it's still very early. That has to be said that we have seen a draft in the last couple of hours of something which is basically just a memorandum saying that we agree to keep talking and to come up with a deal on how to share the profits from these rare earths and critical minerals. So it is a lot less kind of in terms of concrete details, in terms of how much money, where it's going, how the Americans would keep that money, would they be able to take it out of Ukraine back to America. And frankly, even though the Ukraine side says that everyone's agreed on this, it seems far below what Trump was demanding. And it's still not clear whether the US side will take this, will claim this as a win, or will push back. But certainly there is no talk of 500 billion. There is no talk, as Zelenskyy said, of Ukraine being somehow indebted to the US. So it seems from a Ukrainian standpoint a lot less of a commitment and a lot more kind of favourable to what the kind of things that Zelenskyy was asking for.
Mm-hmm. So Zelenskyy is suggesting that he wants to talk to Trump about this in Washington on Friday. Has it been confirmed, though, that Zelenskyy will indeed visit the US?
So still no confirmation of dates of that visit. We'd obviously had Trump saying that he thought maybe it would happen. This visit has been talked of for weeks, if not months. Zelenskyy is very keen to get the handshake with Trump, to talk to Trump one-to-one before Trump meets Putin. But we've already had a story, Reuters reporting a White House official saying that if the agreement isn't agreed and it isn't what the US wants, then maybe that visit doesn't make any sense and it won't happen. So I still think we're going to see some more development, some movement on this. But obviously from Ukraine's perspective, the kind of version we've seen today is pretty favourable.
So if Zelenskyy does travel to Washington, what would his focus be when he's meeting with Trump? What would he ask Trump?
So we've heard from Zelenskyy today, and pretty extraordinary, really, he was admitting that he would basically just ask what's going on, that there's so little clarity here on what exactly Trump is thinking and where he wants to go and what his roadmap is, that one of the main aims of this visit would be to establish, firstly, how much support Ukraine can expect from the US in the coming months, what Trump is planning to do with the Russians, and then thirdly, some kind of intermediary role where Zelenskyy would communicate to Trump what it is the Europeans are willing to do in terms of securing the peace after any potential ceasefire. So I think that just gives you an indication of quite how much confusion there is and quite how little real kind of in-depth communication there seems to be between Kyiv and Washington, that basically it has to be Zelenskyy who is the kind of messenger and to try and find out what exactly is going on in Donald Trump's head.
DW's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv. Nick, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there.
Rachel Tausendfreund is a U.S. domestic and foreign policy expert at the German Council on Foreign Relations. I asked her earlier whether Ukraine would really sign something without a concrete U.S. commitment on security.
They might not have a choice. The last I heard, I saw about 10 minutes ago, that there was language in the agreement that hinted at U.S. support for Ukrainian efforts to get a security guarantee. That's pretty vague, and that certainly falls very far short of what Zelenskyy would want. But at this moment, he needs good relations with Donald Trump, and he needs also some good press in the Republican circles in the U.S. So any kind of mention of U.S. support for security guarantees is welcome and is a good first step for Zelenskyy.
So Zelenskyy has said that this is just a starting point for a wider agreement. What exactly might that look like?
So they've been talking in the administration, different figures in the administration have made the point that if the U.S. is economically engaged in Ukraine, then they also have an interest in making sure their investments are secure. So it's a kind of around the side security agreement. And I think this is a step toward, in general, more U.S. commitment, investment in Ukraine, better relations between Trump and Zelenskyy, in the hopes, in general, of a peace agreement or ceasefire that will be more favorable to Kyiv. And this is what really they're focused on right now in Kyiv.
How likely do you think it is that we'll see such an agreement hashed out? I mean, we've just seen that Trump didn't exactly invite Zelenskyy to come to Washington. He's just said, I hear he's coming, and Zelensky's now saying that he would like to have this visit. What do you think Ukraine's president can actually expect from Trump in Washington?
It's tough. This visit comes, when there's progress on this deal, but also just a few days after the anniversary, the 3-year anniversary of the beginning of this war that saw the U.S. government historically siding with Russia and North Korea in declining to endorse a resolution condemning the Russian aggression and the Russian invasion. So it's a very bad time right now for Zelensky-Trump relations. The Trump administration, I think, is trying to be soft with Putin right now to draw Putin to the table. But this could also be viewed as a weak hand, right? If they are having to deny reality in order to conduce Putin to start negotiations, that's not a good sign for Putin's willingness to really talk.
And broadly speaking, when you look at the Trump administration's motives here, why have they been so determined to get this deal with Ukraine done?
I think it's 3 parts. So Donald Trump likes to think of himself as a deal maker, and he likes to sort of bring deals home that offer some win for the American public, and especially some kind of win that former presidents weren't able to get. So he gets that in this case. Second, there seems to be a particular attention to critical minerals in this new Trump administration. Part of the talk about Greenland is motivated by a focus on critical minerals. So I think that's part of it. And a third part, I would suspect that both Zelenskyy and maybe people in the Trump administration who are more in favor of strong support for Ukraine were also pushing this deal in order to put a positive step in relations between Trump and Zelenskyy that, have been pretty sour.
And that's really interesting what you say, especially with that second point. Can Ukraine offer the United States something with regard to critical minerals that Russia can't?
Well, Russia has actually floated that they would be willing to cooperate with the U.S. To get those minerals that are on the currently Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine. But that's much less further along, and so a deal with Ukraine is more realistic. And it was floated by the Ukrainians, so it's not clear to what extent you could take Putin's offer seriously right now. And like I said, I think there are people in the administration who are eager to do this deal with Ukraine. And for Trump, it looks like the U.S. is finally getting something for its support of Ukraine in his way of thinking.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. That is Rachel Tausendfreund with the German Council on Foreign Relations.